Hi friends, as always I'm super excited to see you here. If we are meeting for the first time, I'm Uma Shankar Pandey and this is the Dr. USP channel. I host videos on media, communications, statistics and research on this channel. To stay updated with the latest videos on the channel, I urge you to consider subscribing to the channel. I think, therefore I am, are the famous words of French philosopher René Descartes. What it actually means is that a thinking mind acts out of its own free will. Structuralism was a very popular idea in the 1960s and 70s in Western Europe. The idea was that people's conduct were influenced by forces of which they were unaware of. Let's discuss structuralism made easy today. The human mind, as we know, is divided into the conscious and the unconscious part. Structuralism talks about how an individual is propelled by these unconscious forces. Structuralism was heavily influenced by structural linguistics. It believed that the real structures were at a level much deeper than the surface facts. People live their lives within the context of larger structures. These structures could be social, cultural, political, and historical. These structures shape and even determine individual decisions, choices, beliefs, and values. Structuralism moves away from the humanistic viewpoint that people are self-directing, autonomous agents, that they have control over what they do. Structuralism focuses on the structures which give coherence, regularity, and meaning to social interactions. Language is taken as the central model of analysis in structuralism. This is because individual speech is a universal element of all societies and cultures. It will not be possible without an enabling structure to give random words meaning. Swiss structural linguist Ferdinand de Saussure has had a remarkable influence over contemporary social theory. Especially the traditions of structuralism and post-structuralism owe their origins to de Saussure's work. Our language pre-exists us as individuals, and we must absorb its pre-existing forms and rules. So, language is a social institution. Saussure focused analysis on language as a structure, the structure that constitutes us to our very roots. Language is divided into two parts, la langue, which are individual speech acts, and la parole, the rules of language. When we speak, we unconsciously apply the rules of language system we have learned. The world is internally structured along the lines of its languages, by which individuals come to know the social facts. Meaning is composed of signifiers, which are sounds, images, written text or inscriptions, and the signified, the mental image or the concept to which the signifiers refer. They are distinct but they are inseparable, like the two sides of a paper. The relation between the words and objects is arbitrary. For example, the word dog and its relation to dog is arbitrary. According to Saussure, the meaning is made by the difference of the object with others. It's the difference through which a bond between the signifier and the signified is created, and meaning is created. The use of a signifier involves the negating, denying, or forgetting of other signifiers. Hot, for example, only takes on the force of signifying when it's regarded as different to cold. We now discuss the work of French anthropologist Claude Levi-Strauss. Claude Levi-Strauss's massive work on kinship and myth gave a strong fillip to structuralism as an intellectual force. He argued that the savage mind had the same structures as the civilized mind, and that human characteristics are universal. Through his 4-volume Mythologics, Claude Levi-Strauss attempted a grand theory through the study of myths. He believed that a cultural patterning is influenced by the huge reservoir of unconscious and universal structures of the mind. The basis of Levi-Strauss's structural anthropology is the idea that human brain systematically processes structured units of information that combine and recombine to create models that explain the world we live in, at times suggest imaginary alternatives, and sometimes give tools with which to operate in the world. Human behavior is influenced by unconscious forces beyond human control. Levi-Strauss could find unifying structures in the myths in different cultures. In other words, there were similarities in myths across the world, and he believed that the structural laws of these myths would ultimately transform fairy tales into science. We now discuss the work of French semiotician Roland Barthes. Roland Barthes' path-breaking books, such as Mythologies published in 1957, Elements of Semiology published in 1964, and The Fashion System published in 1967, are major contributions in the field of structuralism. Barthes found that everyday mythologies are the tool to make what is cultural seem natural. He referred this as the ceaseless what goes without saying. So this is a structure that exists. Myth converts culture into nature. Culture promotes particular meanings only through a concealment of other ideological ones. His extremely popular essay, The Death of the Author, is an extremely important contribution in this field. It means that meaning is not something retrieved or discovered, but something generated in the process of reading a text, so which is an active action. Much of what the author writes is not consciously produced by the individual author. Barthes describes the structure of mythic language as ideological because it blocks its own relative artificial status and attempts to pass itself as something which is natural and universal. Nothing could be more mythic than the most obvious, Barthes says. French philosopher Michel Foucault never approved being called a structuralist. However, his early works, The Birth of the Clinic in 1963, The Order of Things in 1966, and The Archaeology of Knowledge in 1969, demonstrate the method of a high structuralist. His analysis of the origins of modern medicine and psychiatry in terms of the systemic features of language and discourse is structuralist. Foucault's method of writing history, which is known as genealogical, sought to trace the unthought processes governing the structure of social things, to reveal a positive unconscious of knowledge. So through old discursive practices, he sought to discover the unthought processes. According to Foucault, the power of knowledge moves on several levels. First, it is the power of classifying languages, of determining that certain languages will have an overarching hold over life. For example, privileging certain discourses. He gives the example of discourses of the medical profession and economists. In Discipline and Punish, published in 1977, Foucault develops a history of punishment and prisons and introduces his celebrated concept, power knowledge. It describes the relations of power and knowledge as imprinted on the human body through disciplinary codes and forms of punishment. Foucault describes the panoptical prison as a metaphor for total surveillance. The prison was circular in shape with a guard in a central tower keeping a watch on the prisoners. The design made it impossible for the prisoner to tell if the guard was watching or not, since the tower windows were fitted with a Venetian blind. They were of the impression that they were always being watched. For Foucault, this principle was a structure of domination in other organizations too. The panoptical surveillance, or the feeling of being watched over, organized the practical knowledge of daily life and is responsible for people doing or not doing certain things. Thanks for staying along, friends. As usual, it was a delight having you here. I'll be back with another video very soon. Till then, have a great time.